It's me, your humble host and favorite incarnation of the goo that accretes at the bottom of a dumpster. As you can see, I've morphed into a particularly opinionated form today, so make sure you like and subscribe before I collapse back into a pile of festering fetid slime. Today, we're going to be discussing democracy, specifically American democracy, and whether or not it's just too cringe to be allowed to exist. As evidenced by the beginning of this video, I've been noticing a very interesting trend amongst my dear lefty comrades that seems to be indicating a creeping black-pilledness in regards to electoralism in America and its ability to actually affect change. The American government has been seeming pretty flaccid as of late, and it can often feel like it functions primarily as job security for our country's most foreskin-like senior citizens. As far as my own political ideologies go, I consider myself a democratic, libertarian socialist whose first principles are informed by a neo-pagan syncretic eco-animism, generally and very, very vaguely described as eco-anarchism. I tend to be of the opinion that if states must exist, then their primary function should be to help people in material ways as a function of the collective power of the state's productive capacity, and that they should be small and relatively non-hierarchical. I don't love the idea of large, centralized, and violent states, but my personal feelings about that particular matter don't have much effect on whether or not post-colonial nation-states continue to exist. I'm also deeply skeptical of left-leaning ideologies that tell us to completely divest from statist politics. Because when the left lost faith in the government en masse after the Vietnam War, it made it real easy for neoliberalism to sneak in and absolutely decimate all the institutions that are actually valued by the left. And that's just worked out super great for us, hasn't it? Giving up the desire to control the direction of the state merely means that you're ceding that control, uncontested, to neoliberal fascism. In a time of unprecedented ecological fragility, does that seem like a good idea? Of course, in my perfect world, I could just live feral among the tree people, untaxed and free, communing daily with the spirit of the great river and the mycological dirt goddess. No masters, no borders, blah-de-blah-de-blee-de-blah. However, despite the lofty implications of my personal politics and utopian visions, I'm also a realist. As I've stated elsewhere on this channel, a truly ecosystem-level analysis of a system's dynamics requires that we consider every aspect of the system's implications when working within it. Unless your goal is to clear-cut the forest, level the earth, and completely start anew, then you need to learn to work with the landscape that you've already got in front of you. So, what does that landscape look like? It looks like we've got two deeply entrenched political establishments, one of whom is comprised of some of the most uninspiring and ineffectual geriatrics that anybody has ever seen. And the other party is in many ways the same, except, and this is a key distinction here, they're straight up fascists. On one hand, the Democrats, ostensibly representing America's left, have long failed to live up to the lofty goals of progressive American politics. These weak sauce vibes have been a symptom of their own desire to uphold the neoliberal status quo, while also acting as a function of the extent to which Republicans have numerous structural advantages in America's electoral system via representation in the Senate, the filibuster, and partisan gerrymandering. On the other hand, the Republican Party is fascist. Now, I would be remiss if I were to make this video without acknowledging the countless ways in which libs and dems are just blisteringly cringe. Let us not forget the pussy hats. What could be more cringe than an army of mostly white libs wearing matching pink hats and thinking that that was the best way to stand up to the installment of an aspiring fascist dictator? These I voted sticker shoes being sold in partnership with Pod Save America. Not sure who would be so into the aesthetic of the I voted sticker that they needed to pay $89 so they could wear them on their feet year-round, but that's gonna be a no for me, dog. Cringe. Nancy Pelosi, she's old, she's rich, she's cringe. Actually, most establishment Democrats in general have been condemned to eternal cringitude. These yard signs. I respect the vibes, but come on guys, you gotta admit, kinda cringe. Democrats thinking that the best way to deal with bodily autonomy being revoked for millions of Americans is to send out mass amounts of emails asking for money is just a real cringeworthy vibe, my guy. Anything related to libs and dems being all like, it's Mueller time, 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 is so unbearably cringe that it makes me want to boof a slurry of molten nails and bleach in every succeeding incarnation until I have been forever wiped off the wheel of samsara. And let us not forget this moment, so reprehensibly cringe that it may have doomed generations to live under the fascist regimes of the unfolding climate apocalypse.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls. The polls. Pokemon go to the, I don't know, the polls. I'm trying to figure out the polls. Coding the polls. I don't know who created coding. I don't know who created the polls. I don't know who created jobs. Jobs, Pokemon go to the jobs.
Okay, before we go any further and die from all the cringe, let us consider a couple key questions. What is the point of politics on the left? Is politics all about obsessively shitposting the most cynical, black-pilled take on social media so that we can all seem very good and insightful and totally unduped by the liberal elite who's actually the exact same as Republicans? Or perhaps the point of politics is to obtain and wield power, both so that we can use that power to unfuck the world while also using it to protect the vulnerable from fascists. Also keep in mind as we go along that on the right, there is no ambiguity about what the end goal of political struggle is. For the Republican Party, there is no question that the desired end goal of all political pursuits is to gain and maintain real institutional power. That's what they want, because they know that's the best and most direct way to accomplish their nefarious ends. Okay, so let's give ourselves the benefit of the doubt here and assume that our politics is anything beyond just the woke lord equivalent of those tropical birds dancing around to showcase their suitability as the wokest birdmate. Let us assume that politics on the internet left is actually concerned with gaining, maintaining, and wielding power. What are the goals? What are the ends that could be achieved by gaining access to true, durable political power? Protecting trans kids? Universal healthcare? Decarbonization? Reshaping the economy to address climate change? Soil conservation? Abortion access? Income inequality? An effective, efficient, and compassionate welfare state? Cancellation of student debt? Empowerment of unions? Ending the war on drugs? Reparations for the indigenous and descendants of the formerly enslaved? Welcoming and protecting immigrants? Prison abolition? Police reform? Housing reform? Exiling all landlords to a malaria-infested penal colony off the coast of Nicaragua? Rounding up fossil fuel executives and forcing them to live off microplastics and exhaust fumes for the rest of their natural lives? Whatever you may see as the top goals of your political pursuits, now is when we ask ourselves, how might one obtain such power? No, I'm not talking about the power to reach a critical mass of angry Twitter users to shame a multinational corporation into making a flaccid apology for its latest failed attempt at genuflecting to the gays or whatever. I'm talking about real, hard, sexy political power. Like the type of power that makes laws and policies and has an actual enduring effect on people's lives kind of power. The way I see it, there are exactly two ways to achieve this type of power. The first is through violence. The day that a neo-Lenin arises from the faceless horde of Twitter anons and arouses the proletariat to take up arms against the US government, a state with nuclear weapons, militarized police, and a military with the most advanced weaponry in the world and an unlimited budget. And the proud legions of the Zillennial Red Army shall stand arrayed against the forces of capital, buzzing on vape juice and serving up weapons-grade hot takes on the internet.web so based that the United States government and all the combined forces of global capital are left with no choice but to surrender unconditionally to the imminence of this meme-pilled neo-Marxist paradise. Alright, my aspiring People's Liberation Army of Memistan, what's the plan? What targets have we selected? Have we started training? Wars are pretty expensive, you know. Well, what's the plan for funding the operations? Have you acquired any wealthy international backers? Ideally, we would get a foreign government to provide weapons and funding to the movement. Have you started cultivating relationships with any countries with deep enough pockets who are also willing to openly ally in an insurrectionary war against a nation who basically backs up the entire world economy? Also, how is this revolutionary army going to be structured? Is there going to be like a centralized command structure, or are we just going to do rogue guerrilla militias roaming the countryside? Also, it's going to be hard to feed ourselves and participate in a capitalist economy while openly revolting against the international capital system. So we're going to need a pretty broad basis of popular support to feed and shelter our movement. Unless the plan is just to loot and steal all of our food and housing and shit. Have we started efforts at building a base of popular support so invested in our movement that they're willing to stand up against the greatest apparatus of state violence ever conceived of by humanity? Also, there's going to be a shit ton of popular resistance. Since, you know, we live in a country that's been huffing the fumes of violent anti-communist rhetoric for like at least 80 years at this point. Also, there are at least hundreds of right-wing militias that have been actively fantasizing about and training for this exact scenario for decades. So what's the plan to deal with all that? Mass executions, prison camps, and political re-education? Word. I'll just let y'all handle that, I guess. Also, as I'm sure you already know, since we're all students of history here, but most of us will die. Like you, definitely you. Definitely also me. We'll all either get vaporized by a drone strike while hiding out in our forest commune, or geo-tracked on our cell phones and imprisoned in a CIA black site, never to be heard from again. Also, as I'm sure you know from literally any knowledge of online leftist circles, but there's going to be a lot of infighting. The tanky brigades are definitely going to try and take over. Purges of party leadership will follow. The Cancel Kid brigades are going to try and have the entire command structure fired for ableism during basic training or some shit. The Ann Prim brigades are just going to go feral and start laying around all day covered in moss. And the Nancy Pelosi brigade is going to be really turned off by all this violence. And when it's all over, most of us will be dead. Many, many, many others will be dead. And will have succeeded? Violence is one answer to this problem of gaining more power. But let's just say that the outcome of such a pursuit in a country with a rich history of aggressively smashing any and all forms of left-wing popular violence is maybe not going to go great for us. Also, let's be 100% clear that the majority of the victims of such revolutionary violence will not be billionaires being led off to the guillotines. As soon as shit starts popping off, they'll just jet away to their bunkers in the Swiss Alps or their secret moon base or whatever. The people that will be most victimized by such a violent event will be the people that are already more likely to be exposed to violence. Vulnerable people, poor people, marginalized people. As soon as the status quo of the current state is smashed away, waves of violence will be visited upon the vulnerable and the marginalized by the legions of fascist militias that have been preparing for and fantasizing about this exact scenario. Are you ready for that? Now, the other way to wield political power is the cringy, boring, incrementalist, and deeply unsexy ritual of going to your local library or Baptist church or whatever, chatting with some nice retiree named Gladys who is going to look your name up in a big binder, entering a secret booth, and casting a vote. Ugh, boring, cringe, yawn, not electoralism. Okay, hear me out. This video is not a defense of liberal politicians, establishment Democrats, etc. I don't like Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, or Kamala any more than you do. They're all relics of a bygone era who should have retired decades ago. But, you know who I dislike infinitely more? Literal fascists. Let us consider our list of potential goals again, and the fascist positions on them. Protecting trans kids by dead-naming them, revoking their gender-affirming healthcare, and protecting them from their parents, who are groomers. Universal healthcare? That's socialism. We should all die in debt, as the founders intended. Decarbonization? You mean emasculating our hyper-masculine fossil fuel machines? What is this, communist Venezuela? Reshaping the economy to address climate change? Stop speaking Chinese. Soil conservation? You mean soil wussification? Abortion access? Had an abortion? Here's access to prison. Welcoming and protecting immigrants? They'll feel very welcomed and protected in our concentration camps. An effective, efficient, and compassionate welfare state? If you're poor, God clearly doesn't love you enough for you to have money, honey. Cancellation of student debt? Cancel culture run amok. Empowerment of unions? You mean police unions and only police unions, right? Ending the war on drugs? But we love war. Reparations for the indigenous and descendants of the formerly enslaved? It's actually white people that need reparations because of all the reverse racism they've been experiencing lately. Prison abolition? But then, where will we put all the groomer parents of trans kids and poor people of color who needed access to abortion care? Police reform? Reform them into paramilitary units who will summarily execute our political enemies. Housing reform? Reform the housing system into a series of libertarian fiefdoms where landlords shall reign supreme, and they shall all pay fealty till the ultimate landlord, Lord Father, two swinging nuts of pure gold, Daddy Trumpy. Listen, my friends, I am in no way ignorant about the deeply fucked nature of these United States. Fun fact about me, but I actually have a master's degree in Southeast Asian Studies. And as a student of Southeast Asian history, I've done a lot of studying about the Second Indochina War, known in America as the Vietnam War. I've been to war museums in Vietnam. I've seen little kids who had their arms blown off by the undetonated cluster bombs left by American bombers in Laos. And I've been to the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Few things are more blackpilling to the idea of this American empire than the sight of children born deformed from chemical defoliants from a war that they had nothing to do with, or the machinations of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Henry Kissinger and the CIA that led directly to the creation of one of the most murderous and genocidal regimes known to history, the Khmer Rouge. The crimes of the American empire are manifold, innumerable, terrible, and ongoing. There are countless more recent examples that one could go on ad infinitum about, one branch of the US government or another doing some shit that's just mind-numbingly fucked up. I also know what it's like to chafe daily under capitalism, to have to essentially, in some way or another, sacrifice your true values in order to be able to live in a house and buy food and shit. Just to be able to survive under capitalism. I know intimately well the cognitive dissonance of having my true values and first principles tell me one thing about the world, while society coerces me into living in such a way that contravenes those principles on a daily fucking basis. Which is why I have decided to live my life occupying the ecological niche of a raccoon. I'm also deeply sympathetic to feelings about the extent to which Democrats have done a whole hell of a lot to make entire generations feel like our liberal democracy is nothing but a sham. I'm of the opinion that the Democrat establishment repeatedly undermining the Bernie Sanders campaign was almost as equally damaging to American democracy as anything Trump ever did, because it has clearly instilled a profound cynicism in most people on America's true left that the electoral system isn't for them. I tend to be of the opinion that most of this shit would be solved if America was able to have more than two actually powerful political parties. And in many ways, Democrats have been deeply undemocratic in their monopolizing of left-leaning power. But it is the central thesis of this video that all these demonstrably reprehensible things about the United States government, both past and present, are not a good reason to surrender it to the fascists. This is because there is a difference between the many nightmare legacies of the American empire and the millions of real, vulnerable people that live in America that need protection from the fascists. Even if your politics are little more than America bad, then you can't tell me that you think it would be better with fascists in charge. Unless you yourself are a fascist. If you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that America's right has gone pretty cuckoo banana buttercakes in the past few years. The fucking theocons are upon us, y'all. We have open Christian nationalists calling for all sorts of fascist shit, and all of their electoral incentives are to ratchet up the batshititude. Here's a concrete example on why you should get your sexy ass to the voting booth and cast a vote against fascism. Senator Lindsey Graham, Robert E. Lee's reincarnated deep-fried sphincter, has openly proclaimed that if the Republicans regain majorities in the House and Senate in the 2022 midterms, they will instate a federal abortion ban. Is greater access to abortion and bodily autonomy for people who can become pregnant important to you? Then make sure this Jim Crow-era cartoon character doesn't get what he wants. Make sure the Republicans don't regain that control. Also, want to know how Republicans gained the power to overturn Roe v. Wade? They wielded a decades-long campaign inside the electoral system, losing battle after battle, until they finally won the presidency and Senate, and they were able to stack the court with right-wing hacks. They used the electoral system and electoral politics, amongst a lot of other sleazy shit, to win a battle that they've been fighting since the 80s. Quite literally, they lost and lost and lost and lost, but eventually won by voting more and campaigning, voting harder, and applying pressure. They used electoralism to get what they want. If Trump hadn't won the election in 2016, we would probably still have Roe v. Wade. That's just true. So remind me how electoralism doesn't actually matter again? How about doing literally anything about climate change? Is that important to you? It's super important to me. You know who not only refuses to take action on climate change, but actively seeks to make it worse? The fucking fascists. How do we keep them from doing that? Keep them from gaining power. How do we keep them from gaining power? One super convenient way to do it that doesn't also involve getting shot at and or eventually blown up or imprisoned is to defeat them in a democratic system. Electoralism also doesn't only affect people on a national level. District attorneys, for example, have a shit ton of power in local court systems and can do a lot of damage to marginalized communities if the wrong person is elected. The same goes for judges, sheriffs, city council members, etc. The inverse is also true. Imagine if we had some base prole elected district attorney, imbued with the power to prosecute crooked cops and corrupt politicians. Filling local political politicians with their guys is literally the fascist playbook. So why not do the same thing right back? Which brings us to the core point of this whole video. Dear anarchists, run for sheriff. Power as a concept is obviously super complicated, and the American left's demonstrable unwillingness to gain and wield actual institutional power is symptomatic of the extent to which we feel like we've never really had any in the first place. Most of the time, it seems like we'd much rather critique power rather than actually seek it out. And that's just weak. It definitely doesn't help that we're used to seeing every person who ever tried to actually do anything substantial on the left be mercilessly devoured and canceled by their own. But let's say that we don't actually care about power for ourselves, which is fine. Let us at least agree that we should keep literal fascists from gaining the power to govern us in the land that we call home. It's almost like if the act of voting can keep literal fascists from gaining power, then voting is anti-fascist. Consider also that the fascists have been working deliberately to undermine democracy in the past few years. They know that most people don't want their neo-Nazi theocratic libertarian hellscape government, which is why they've decided to subvert the democratic system and impose their own autocratic regimes. If the fascists see democracy as the greatest threat to their project, then maybe it's a more powerful weapon than we realize. Also, the fascists make no political distinction between Chairman Meow, the hammer and sickle NB cat girl with a land acknowledgement in their Twitter bio, and AOC or Joe Biden. To the fascists, y'all are literally the same force of degenerate liberal decadence, and they fantasize about doing violence to y'all in equal measure. Do you know how many neo-fash wackadoos there are out there who have been butt-chugging libs of TikTok content and actively dreaming about killing trans people, gay people, socialists, and the liberal elite? To them, it's all the same thing. So, perhaps, we should see ourselves as a raid against a common enemy. The Soviet Union didn't abstain from wiping the Third Reich off the face of the earth so they could own Winston Churchill. They banded together, and they vanquished those motherfuckers. And to all of you that shall be unpersuaded by this, and remain convinced that electoralism is a sham, I'm a lib, a mouthpiece of the CIA, and blah 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 blah, at the very least, stop telling people on your side not to vote. Also, CIA, I'm still waiting on that fat bag you promised. I can't be doing all this imperialist propaganda for nothing. I got this from a dumpster. Literally, I can think of no better fascist psyops than to undermine the left's confidence in the electoral process. Like, are the people posting these memes secretly Proud Boys or something? And if you're really that fucking cynical, then at least do something useful and be a little more tactical about it. Go make some account called All Commies Must Die or something, and then post your anti-electoralism hot takes in those algorithms. Convince the fascists that voting doesn't work. If you're really that sure, at least you'd be disempowering the people who actively want to murder trans people. Voting against fascists is just another tactic, and it's one that works really fucking well. It's why Donnie Doo-Doo wasn't able to declare himself El Presidente until the end of time. If we consider anti-fascism as an ongoing and united front, then abandoning such a potent weapon makes zero sense. A diversity of tactics is the way to win. Learn how to use weapons, intimidate fascists, lift weights, undermine and infiltrate their organizations, practice mutual aid, build due power, do badass shit like the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club, and vote. American democracy has its cringeworthy moments, yes. You'll find no argument from me there. But the two main alternatives that I see presented by the internet left are either actualizing complete industrial collapse, resulting in billions dead and a total transformation of all human societies, which I don't really see gaining much popular traction, or installing some neo-Stalinist, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, authoritarian dream state, which will totally not just be the most annoying people on the internet all trying to install themselves as dictator for life, which is uninspiring, to say the least. Democracy is messy and unromantic, and requires compromise, which can be unpalatable. But to me, the true cringe content is all the people out there posting some flaccid, whiny pessimism disguised as an insightful hot take, which actually just serves as an over-intellectualized justification for why they're just going to stay sitting in their room shitposting instead of actually trying to seize the power which was given to them. A power that they take for granted. And a power that apparently they are indifferent to losing. It's all fucked anyways, so let's just give up. Is not an insightful, interesting, or helpful statement. It is the political equivalent of the dude who recently dropped out of high school smoking cigarettes under the bleachers, trying to convince a bunch of kids younger than him that he made the cool and smart decision because he's going to go get rich on NFTs instead. It is not tactical, it is not strategic, it is not useful, unless you're secretly a fascist. Its sole outcome will be surrendering this country to fascism. Therefore, it is giving the fascists what they want. So, let's keep fascist bastards from gaining electoral power. Because that's the power that they want. Once they have the power of the law, then they have the power of the land. And they've shown that they will do anything they can to entrench themselves into it. Even if you want to blow up the system and tear it all down, at the very least, just vote to spite the fascists. Electoral power is what they want. So, let's derive deep satisfaction by keeping them from getting it. And in regards to the capital R revolution, I'm not entirely unconvinced that it will be necessary at some point, especially if the climate situation continues to deteriorate and governments continue to fail us. I'm also not here to tell you that fantasizing about or planning some revolutionary direct action in response to the climate crisis is completely batshit. In fact, feeling the urge to lash out in self-defense against the global machine of mass ecological death is, to me, pretty fucking rational. However, as we've all collectively observed, that very machine has basically an infinite capacity to absorb and cause death, no matter how many bodies we toss into its gears. Most people living under capitalism probably don't see it as beneficial to their short or long-term interests to completely destroy the entire means of their livelihood and survival for the sake of some vague political end espoused by some frothing anon on the internet. If your goal is to destroy for the sake of destruction, for the sake of purely principled violence, well, there's nothing I can do to stop you. But if your goals run counter to the way that most normies live their lives, then those people will only ever see you as their enemy. If you want to truly actualize that revolution that everyone is so convinced that they're going to lead, go start recruiting people that don't spend 1/3 of their entire lives in a meme-induced nihilistic fugue state. You're going to need their help when the metal meets the meat. If the goal is to actually slow the pace of the machine, to change it in lasting ways that could genuinely improve the lives of people currently suffering under capitalism, then ceding control of the entire state apparatus to the fascists that desperately want control of it is going to do nothing but set us back decades. Be angry, be wrathful, and don't abandon any of the weapons at your disposal, including the ability to vote and keep fascists out of the halls of power. If 2024 rolls around and we have a neo-Hitlerian Ronald Trump Santis as ill douchebag king for life, and MTG has been appointed chairwoman of the House Rounding Up the Trans Kids Committee, then it will certainly be time to reconsider these positions. But until then, if you feel the need to post some vague bullshit about the imminent neo-insert-rad-left buzzword here revolution being the reason why you shouldn't vote on your social media feed, how about You put your phone down, and then go do something actually revolutionary instead. Learn how to produce food, build better connections to your community and your neighbors, plant fruit trees, start a community garden, learn to safely operate firearms, convert a car to an EV, register some teenagers to vote, dumpster dive and donate the food to a mutual aid organization. Go have a meaningful conversation with someone that completely disagrees with you politically. Divest your precious mind from the endless doom loop of the social media attention economy and go spend time imagining the world that you want to live in. Then go spend more time actually trying to make it happen. Stop fantasizing about some vague revolution that's going to get all your friends killed, and instead start living an actual revolution in your daily life. Because if the fascists start winning, which they very well might, we're going to need each other and all of the power that we can muster. Now, let's go bury fascism in the fucking compost. And vote.